I teach in an instructional design graduate program. I also do a lot of blogging, a lot of videos like this one, and I get asked a lot, how do I become an instructional designer? It's a great question. This is a great field. It's my favorite field, as a matter of fact. Instructional designers make anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 a year. If you're freelancing, you at least start at $50 an hour. You can go up to $100, $150, even $200 an hour, depending on what kind of specialized work that you're doing. So in this video, I'm going to cover briefly what an instructional designer is and what they actually do in day-to-day work, what kind of career opportunities they are, what kind of money is in it for you, and how to get a job as an instructional designer. I have tons of resources for you in the show notes as well, so let's dive in. Let's start with an official definition of instructional design. At its purest, this is the systematic structuring and development of content and experiences to facilitate learning. I got an emphasis there on systematic. A lot of people are doing instructional design, but may not call them instructional designers, or a lot of teachers are developing curriculum, but maybe they're not being that systematic. And this is also about facilitating. So it's not about lectures or old-fashioned forms of teaching where you're standing on the stage and just talking at people. We really have the goal of active learning, of engaging our learners, of facilitating someone else's learning journey. You can't learn for someone, but you can help them facilitate their learning. So we are all about how people actually learn and how we can use technology to do that. I do have two additional definitions here. I often tell people this is all about creating effective learning experiences. I know this is very loosey-goosey. The idea is that learning, especially these days, can come in so many forms. I mean, you have so many different kinds of multimedia, so many different places where people learn. I mean, you can be on your phone standing in the grocery store line, learning something on your phone using a piece of microlearning, for example. So when you're doing instructional design, there's not just courses, there's not just one kind of learning, there's so many different things that you can be building that help people learn. So I do use the phrase learning experiences to refer to that all-encompassing definition. My second definition that I use is that this field is the boundary. It's that line between the science of learning, between educational psychology and educational technology. I often refer to instructional design as being liminal. It's this field that's on the edge of a lot of other things. So it helps to know, I mean, it's essential to know, in fact, how people learn, and it helps to know a lot of different kinds of educational technology, or at least what's possible, so you can figure out what's going to be best for facilitating learning for your particular learner. All right. That said, it's nice to have these airy definitions, but what does an instructional designer actually do? It varies quite a bit. I know, that's also really helpful. It might be that you are working through a instructional design model like ADDIE to plan a learning experience. So you're starting at A for analyze, going all the way through design, development, you implement, you evaluate, and you're doing the whole thing, and you're planning out an entire learning experience for, say, a group of employees at a company. You might be converting existing learning to online learning. That's pretty common. You might be working with subject matter experts, commonly abbreviated as SMEs, to gather content, to evaluate what you've already completed, to have them evaluate your content, your course that you built. You might be doing something like a performance analysis, where you are actually going onto a factory floor and observing workers and how they actually work, with the goal of preparing training for new workers who are completely starting from scratch at a factory. You might be someone that's recording videos and editing them to explain certain processes or procedures. You might be an evaluator. Maybe someone else is doing a lot of training at an organization, and it's your job to see if the learners are actually transferring that to what they're doing on the job, to figure out if the training is actually working or not. You might be figuring out how to organize a company's learning, organizational learning system. Maybe there's a lot of different courses and videos at an organization, and it's your job to figure out how to put these into one place, into what's commonly used, a learning management system. And it might be your job to pick one and make it work. There's another really lovely poster that ASU put out. Let's see if I can make this enlarge here. this is a nice poster. So they imagine these three little characters here are instructional designers, and they highlight the other things that they do. So as an instructional designer, yes, you're building relationships with SMEs, you're analyzing, you are basing decisions on data a lot of the time. There is a lot of project management involved. That's something I'm pretty bad at. Got to be a good communicator. So on and so forth. I'll put the link for this in the show notes if you want to check this out. Again, this is from ASU, which hires a ton of instructional designers. And there's a lot of things that go into being a good instructional designer, a really effective instructional designer. So this highlights some of the soft skills that you need to have. Other skills you might need to have. There's a lot of things you can do in instructional design, and depending on what you do, it can be really helpful to have other skills. Graphic design is a commonly cited one in instructional design. It's not enough to be able to build an effective course. It needs to be presented well visually. If you have video editing skills, that can be really helpful. A lot of courses are very video heavy. A lot of organizations rely on video. So if that's something you can do, that's great. You might also include videos as part of a course or a learning experience, and video editing skills can come in handy. Same with audio editing. A lot of voiceover, like this one, comes into play when you are preparing a course or a video or anything else. And if you want a really high quality voiceover, it can be helpful to learn specialized software to figure out a microphone setup that works and be able to edit all of that. LMS, that stands for Learning Management System. If you've ever taken an online course that was delivered on a learning management system, that can be really helpful experience to have. There's a ton of learning management systems out there. You can often get a free trial of those to try them out. It helps to know a little bit about UX design, which is also known as usability. I mean, that's another career all the way unto itself, but knowing something about how people use things and how to make things more usable, especially if you're designing an online experience, that can be helpful. Accessibility. There's a big push towards making everything accessible and having more and more accessibility features. I'm very excited about this. I'm all about accessibility, but there's technical aspects to implementing accessibility, and that might be something you're expected to know. You don't have to be a coder to be an instructional designer. It can help to know a little bit of HTML or CSS coding, so that's something to consider as well. Now, in real life, what does this actually look like? You might be solo. If you work at an organization, you might be doing everything. Or you might be part of a team where you just have one piece of whatever it takes to design an entire learning experience. So if you're solo, you might be doing it all. You might be the designer, you might be building it out, you might be doing all the project management, you might be doing the graphic design, maybe there's an LMS and you're administrating that as well. Again, maybe you're part of a team. Maybe you're just that person on the left there. You just design, you pass it off to someone else to develop. There's someone else managing the entire project. You can go to your graphic designer for graphic help. That's really cool. You might be checking with the LMS administrator to make sure your project is going to work with them. And you're just a small part of a larger system. It really depends on where you are going to be working, what kind of work you're going to be doing, what the day-to-day work will actually look like, and what your specialty will be. You may also just be on a two-person team. You design things, someone else builds them out. Or maybe there's several designers at your company where you just produce storyboards and flowcharts and things, and you pass them off maybe to a contractor, a freelance e-learning developer. They might not even be in your organization. They might be in another country perhaps. So it can really vary. Now, if you're wondering what the difference is between an instructional designer and an e-learning developer, there's a very big difference here. The instructional designer is doing all of the hardcore design work. It's very detailed work where you use your knowledge of how people learn, the science of learning, and you're combining that with the possibilities of technology. So you're building out the design documents for learning experience. You're systematically working through a model like ADDIE, again, analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate. You're figuring all this stuff out. You're working with the subject matter experts. You are pulling together everything you need for the design. You're getting the stakeholders to review it. And once it's all done, you don't build it out. You might pass it off to an e-learning developer, and they will build it out using a software like Storyline or Captivate or some other course authoring tool. A lot of learning management systems have course authoring built in now, so maybe they're building that out. So this is to say that instructional designer is like a high-level position. You have a lot of skills that are very specific to what you do, and it takes a lot of practice and study to get there. E-learning developer, on the other hand, pretty much anyone can teach themselves to use software to build out a course using someone else's design. So that's less specialized work, and that's going to be lower paying than what an instructional designer does. So this is a note as what happens here. Instructional designer is doing all of the work of the design. The e-learning developer produces it in a course. So they can knock that out pretty fast. And oftentimes in instructional design, it can make sense that someone does all the design and someone else actually does the technical building. It might be the instructional designer doesn't even know how to use the authoring tool to make the course. And that's totally normal and pretty frequent. Now, no matter what you're interested in this field, I put this little model up here of Addie so you can see it. There are jobs all along this spectrum. For example, the very first step is analyze here. That's a lot of work to me. It's not my favorite task. I know how important it is to really analyze the learner, analyze the need for learning, but it's not always my cup of tea. However, I have a student that graduated. She went on to work at a military contractor, and her only job is to do analysis. That's literally all she does. Awesome for her. That sounds terrible to me, but that's just to demonstrate that no matter what you're interested in instructional design, there's going to be a specialized position or job out there for you where you can do that. So there's so many possibilities depending on what you really enjoy in instructional design. And the outlook, of course, is very good for this field. I'm obviously biased towards instructional design. I teach in a master's program. I do this for a living. I do this on the side. But the outlook is very good. Now, as proof of this, I pulled up the United States government's Occupational Outlook Handbook. They maintain this and produce a yearly version, giving an economic outlook for most kinds of jobs in the United States. In this handbook, instructional design falls under training and development specialists or managers. Now, instructional design as a field does have a tilt towards adult learning. It does tend to have a corporate tilt. So oftentimes you'll see instructional design kind of like defaulting to adult learning, to adults and companies. That's not to say instructional designers can't do other things. You're not necessarily going to be doing training and development, but it's a place to kind of get a good reference point. So I pulled out the stats for specialists and for managers. This is specialists. So you can see just starting out, if you're very, very brand new to instructional design and you're just doing training, for example, that's going to be starting at $30 per hour, $61,000 per year. Of course, this will vary quite a bit regionally. Large metro areas are going to pay more. Rural will probably pay more like this. They do recommend, as for many white-collar jobs these days, pretty much all of them, you got to have a bachelor's degree. But if you don't have much experience, you can get started at a simpler job in the field and still be making pretty good money. Now, more experience, more money. Managers in the field are going to be making, $60 an hour, $120,000 per year. Again, a lot of people work their way up. You'll see it just still says bachelor's degree. If you have a certificate in the field or you have a master's in the field, that's going to help you get there faster. I also get higher pay for you as well. And I didn't mention the outlook here. Job outlook for specialists, 8%, little faster than average. Job outlook for managers about as fast as average. I would say one good thing about instructional design, though, is that this is kind of like a job that sits, it can be used in any field. No matter what field you're looking at, if there's people that need to learn something, there's going to be instructional designers. So that can be really nice to not be tied to one particular industry. You can bounce around industries as needed depending on what's economically doing well, what's not. You can always transition to freelance work and back again. There's just a lot of opportunities. So that said, you're still watching, you're still interested. How do you become an instructional designer? So in general, you're gonna have to have a bachelor's degree. Potentially, you could self-study to become an instructional designer. A lot of teachers are looking to transition out of the teaching field. You can figure out how your teaching applies to instructional design. You can pick up experience as a freelancer. You can get work as a trainer in an organization. So that's think onboarding when you have a new employee and you have to do the new employee training. That's a lower level job in a lot of organizations, but that's a good place to start as an instructional designer. If you get a job as a trainer, you can work your way up to designing the training and then, maybe manage the training program for the organization. At that point, you're going to be an instructional designer kind of by trade, if not by educational study. There are lots of certificates out there as well as master's degrees. I do teach in a master's program. This is not a shill from, learning in my master's program. It's not essential to have a master's degree, but it can be a shortcut towards getting higher paying jobs more quickly and knowing the theory behind what you're doing on the job. A lot of people become accidental instructional designers. They start as trainers, they're doing something else in a job, all of a sudden they get asked to design some sort of learning experience, and then they go back to earn their master's degree to learn the science behind what they're doing. There's lots of ways to come at this. There's no one perfect or one right way. It all depends on your level of motivation and what your own goals are. If you want to land an instructional design job right now, here's what you do. Look up opportunities and tailor a cover letter, resume, and portfolio to whatever that opportunity is. And I've bolded portfolio here. It is critical if you're trying to land a job in instructional design that you have a web presence like a LinkedIn and that you have a portfolio that shows off what you can do. If you've not worked as an instructional designer, that's okay. We've got resources out there that will guide you on what artifacts to include in your portfolio and how to build your portfolio. See the show notes. I've got links for that as well. Again, you can start at freelancing. There's lots of agencies like Clarity Consultants that will hire a lot of instructional designers or e-learning developers. Great place to start. There's sites like Upwork where you can bid on jobs. You can also find lots of opportunities on social media. Let me pull this one up. I've got a list on my website of a lot of instructional design social media groups. LinkedIn has a ton, Facebook has a ton, there's some on Reddit as well. Oftentimes jobs are posted on these groups, or you can post yourself asking for jobs. There's a lot out there, and people have lots of recommendations for you too. If you're interested in getting a full-time job in instructional design, browse instructional design jobs on LinkedIn, see what appeals to you. I'm based in Tempe, Arizona, so my jobs here are biased towards that area, but there's tons of remote jobs out there. You can see jobs in higher education will usually pay a little bit less but have better benefits. There's a lot of remote jobs that are completely online. There's some hybrid jobs. Fortunately, things are now being labeled pretty well on LinkedIn, whether they're on-site or remote. But you can get an idea of what's out there, what you're interested in, and you can, that's a pretty good one, and you will tailor your cover letter and your resume to whatever it is that you're applying for. And you have to choose. You have to choose what really interests you in instructional design and work towards that, or have, various versions of your cover letter and resume to put out towards those jobs. Now, touch on the portfolio a little bit. Again, I can't say this enough. It's important to tailor your application materials to whatever you're applying for. If you're just shotgunning your application out there, if you're applying to everything, you kind of end up applying to nothing because you're not really showing how you meet the criteria for that particular opportunity. You got to tailor whatever it is that you are applying for, okay? Portfolio, really important. It's okay to use a free website. Most people do. You can host your artifacts elsewhere. So if you have things that are just like documents that show the outline of a training you've designed, you can put those on something like Google Drive. If you have Storyline or Captivate courses, you can host those on Google Cloud Storage or Amazon S3 and embed them on your website. But it's also just important to include some blurb on your portfolio about what makes each artifact special and what that says about you. So portfolios, really important. Again, I have resources for you if you want to make a portfolio and you haven't done one before. Ultimately, keep practicing, keep your skills up, keep applying. I have failed so many times in my life, and now I'm doing pretty well, and I'm still always trying new things and failing at those new things. Failure is how we learn. Keep trying. If you keep striking out, ask someone to review your resume. You can ask me to review your resume. I'll take a look. Again, tailor it for a job that you are applying for. Use the same keywords. Keep trying. Keep studying. Keep learning. There's always more to learn in this field. I really love this field. I call it the best field that no one's ever heard of, but now that you're here, you've heard of it, and I wish you the best of luck, and I would love to hear about your own success in instructional design.